Hi everyone. Firstly, apologize that I wasn't able to make it live on Zoom. But I do want to say that at any point that you are working through this, please feel free to message underneath the post, or if you wanted to direct message me through Facebook, I'm more than happy to clarify or go through anything if you had any questions. And I will be able to meet you at 10:15 virtually through message. The only reason why I couldn't be there in the flesh is just I have two small children, and unfortunately my childcare let me down at the last minute. So filling in for Bon, I'm ready with my content. I'm ready with some good stuff, and hopefully you can just get a little insight, maybe a few things to reflect on. But I am available for questions, and I will make sure that I'm by my phone. I'm ready for any of those messages at 10:15. So as you work through it, you can fire me anything that it feels like that you just want to explore. So I wanted to talk to you today. Bon said that one of the key themes that we've been looking at are kind of boundaries, healthy relationships, love. Love, I suppose, is one of those words that kind of feels a bit airy-fairy. But tonight I thought we could just take time to look at a few different theories that maybe lend themselves to this like human experience of like how we connect and build relationships. And obviously, for those of us who have experienced trauma, our experience with relationships is definitely most often affected by our experience of trauma. It comes through PTSD, sometimes just, ruffles our trust. We start to form thinking patterns in our brain, and synapses in the brain and through neuroplasticity telling us like, limiting beliefs such as I'm the only one who I can trust, when actually in real life there are really good, kind people out there. You've just potentially experienced, something traumatic or terrible, but it doesn't mean that there aren't good people or safe places where you can form healthy boundaries, healthy connections. So tonight when we talk about relationships, about love, those are two big words that I personally wanted to define from my own point of view throughout our talk. So when I talk about a relationship, I wanted to make it very clear that I don't mean always, a partner. It can be a partner. All of the theory can be related to that, but it could also be any healthy relationship that you're trying to cultivate, whether it's a friendship, whether it's work, colleagues trying to form some sort of like relatability, or working through people that we find difficult because they might have qualities that other people have, forms that maybe trigger something. A relationship is anything that you would like to work on, or anything that you desire or you want to manifest or that you pine for. It could be a romantic experience, but it doesn't have to be. So all of the theory tonight is just laid out to make us think. Some of you, I'd love for you to challenge some of the theories as well. You might be sat there thinking, actually yes, actually no, but they're there to challenge us. And when I talk about the word love, I also wanted to highlight it doesn't always have to mean love as in a romantic love. It can mean that, absolutely, if you reflect on, that relationship. Maybe, if there is if you are lucky enough to have a partner in life, maybe it is that. You might not have that. Love is just like loving kindness, like showing kindness, receiving kindness, and how maybe, each of us experience that in different ways, and how if we look at different theories, we might be able just to figure out a little bit more about ourselves and others. So I'm going to start firstly just with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I actually find I come back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a triangle in terms of like a hierarchy. That's why I did that. And is this like little pyramid where, a guy named Maslow, there's lots of research on whether this is his actual triangle or somebody has like put his research into this. But anyways, that's here nor there. He creates this pyramid of motivation for a human being. And when we think about motivation, it is all of the things that allow us to be human, make us tick, in terms of motivation, allow us to feel fulfilled and accomplished in our lives. And at the basic bottom layer of that pyramid, the very first layer is our physiological needs. So in order to be like a fulfilled like human, the very first thing we need is like food, water, warmth, rest. Like we need that, like the basics, right? We can't survive as a human being without that. So that makes sense. Like that's the bottom of the pyramid. Like that is, the basic needs. And then we move into safety. So when we move into our safety needs, that is obviously safety in all capacities, in terms of our home, our environment, the people around us, that sense of security. And that is often maybe what's been disrupted with some of us in our past, is that like what feels safe, what is safe, safety look like for me. But especially when we've experienced things, sometimes that makes us feel unsettled as a human being, and rightly so. And I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows us that can affect our motivation. That can affect so much. So doing the work that you're doing, reflecting, is quite powerful. But the next part of the triangle, the next layer, is belonging and love. And that just means as humans, like we are hardwired. I always like smile about it because I find like the idea of love cringy, like talking about it, but like we are hardwired as human beings. It's what's unique about us as human beings to want a connection with others and to need it, in fact. And that connection, like I said, that relationship that we're talking about can be anything, just having friends or really pining for an intimate relationship. We may or may not, want that, have that, but it is normal if you feel that. It's normal if you are working on relationships, if you've had broken relationships that have shifted your thinking. It's important that we talk about, that it is just being human. So when we think of this, like, again, it's a hierarchy of needs to help us to want to like feel our best selves, to be motivated, to thrive. That's one, the third layer. And so getting, we're in a world where we like are hit with like massive like dopamine hits that, in terms of our social media, a like or a positive comment or something like that, that sometimes gives us a false sense of belonging and love. And then if we don't get it, sometimes we feel this loss and disappointment. So it's very interesting. Like that's your like psychological needs start to play. And the next layer of that like then builds, you can kind of see, my point of view is that it builds into this layer of like self-esteem. So our human nature is, in order to feel our best selves as a human being, we need to have like, our physiological needs, then our safety, then we move into belonging, and then it starts to build on having like a decent self-esteem, and a sense of feeling accomplishment. So again, if any of these layers are not there for you, it's just looking at like what layer is it that's like been disrupted, maybe by your experience, and what can we start beginning to continue to work on. And you can kind of see Bon covering lots of these topics, but I quite like the hierarchy of needs because it allows you to kind of just check in on like, where am I? Where were things disrupted as a human being? What do I need to continue to build on? And finally, that very like top peak is like self-fulfillment. So the idea of like, creating something like and feeling really confident to put it out in the world, whether it's like a piece of writing or presenting something at work that's a unique idea, whatever it is for you, like, that makes you feel like you're contributing to society, making a difference, that kind of thing. That obviously will come, and that sense of motivation should you have all those layers. And so it's just a model to help us reflect, and help us to kind of just see, as human beings, like I'm not quite sure. I like the layers. I guess my challenge, this is like based on a theory from early like 1940s, 1948. It's still used now, but I do think that maybe, there's other routes. Maybe we don't have to go from one to the other to get to self-actualization, but I do think that there's a lot of substance in these five things, that make us feel fulfilled as humans, allow us to continue to feel like that motivation within us, that we don't feel this like sense of feeling stuck, and I love that phrase. I often say it to myself when things feel heavy. I kind of remind myself, like, don't get stuck, like just take a deep breath and go back to what it is you need. Is it your security and your safety that's been rocked? Is it belonging at that you're pining for it, and remembering that when that happens, like triggering in your mind, like, hey, I'm just being human, like there's nothing wrong with me for wanting this, or if I am feeling a little bit lonely, or whatever these feelings are, it's just saying like I'm human and it's great that I want these things. And then we come to like, all of, once we learn a little bit about that side of our human, I suppose, need, then we need to start to figure out a little bit more about ourselves and like, personally, how do I fulfill those sorts of needs? So I want to talk to you lightly about, I don't know if you've come across this, but I've always found the idea of love languages very interesting. So originally, the love languages were written for building and exploring healthy relationships in terms of like a partner. But I deeply believe that love languages make sense in terms of like any connection, sense of belonging that we have with other people. You could have a friendship that feels like unfulfilling. I think like sometimes I've always found it harder to set my own boundaries within friendships. And sometimes I found it like easier to set a boundary in a more intimate relationship. I don't know why, but I have like a pattern of allowing people to potentially like walk all over me in a friendship. And so it's kind of just reflecting on that. And when I came across the love languages theory, again, taking it lightly, taking it what you believe, might support you in this. I find in my coaching, I come to the love languages often because it really does help you understand like whether you're feeling unfulfilled in your connection, with you and your mother, or you and a partner, or you in a friendship. Sometimes it comes down to the way in which like you are communicating, and between the two of you, not just you. It's not all on your shoulders, obviously. But I like the idea to now we'll explore like the 5 love languages just to give you some insight on like what it is it that you're looking for. If you've not come across them, maybe something to kind of look a little bit more into. But what is a love language, I suppose? And I guess it comes down to this idea, like, have you ever sort of had a friend who said that they'd like prefer a clean kitchen over flowers any day as like a sign of like, I don't know, kindness or love? I guess, love can be just like kindness. And actually, like, I think it's interesting because some people would be like, no, like the flowers really show that they care. Forget like cleaning the kitchen. But there's somebody else who cleaning the kitchen would mean more to them than flowers. And that is just like our own like love language. And that's rooted in like, our past and our past experiences. Is really interesting to kind of reflect on the idea that we all express and receive love differently. And remember, love is used lightly here. Like maybe use it as like kindness and affection, showing, that respect. And those differences could maybe sometimes be the reason why feelings and good intentions sometimes get lost in translation. And that happens often with people. It's not you're feeling unfulfilled. So, like, imagine this situation. We'll use a partner just as an example, but like, or like it could be, a parent maybe, or something like a friend. But imagine you spend weeks trying to think of like a really lovely, thoughtful gift, and you really went go all out. You get something really personal, spent more money than maybe you usually would, and then you've given it to them and they've said like, oh, I would have just been happy like ordering in, thank you so much, like it just would have been nice like to just sit and spend some time, but like I appreciate it. And but you kind of felt like you didn't get the like, oh my gosh, like you really went above and beyond. You didn't feel like they gave you like the thank you or the wow that you were kind of looking for. And it's not necessarily that they are ungrateful, or that you got it wrong. It's just maybe that person communicates love and kindness and that respect and that showing that connection, in a different way. And sometimes that's where we can become unstuck, whether it's a partner or a friendship, whatever. And I sometimes think like reflecting on like, I wonder like what would their love language be when you're feeling frustrated is important. So recognizing how you and a partner like to receive and express yourselves, in terms of love, could lead to more thoughtful connections, healthier relationships, not to mention like less explosive emotions. Does that make sense? So that maybe you leave holding a lot in, especially those of us who've experienced trauma. We often have like anxiety around, was that good enough? What was that reaction about? There's so much that kind of floods our minds, the monkey mind, that we do, need to sometimes break it down and think like, actually, there are 5 different ways that people give and receive, this kind of love, and maybe their love language is different to what I've offered. And it's not to say that like, it was wrong to give a really nice gift. It's amazing. But if you don't get the reaction that you're expecting, it doesn't mean that they don't love it. Maybe you just love that love language and you've expressed that a little bit more. So again, it's just learning about each other. So let me get into it. There are, at the moment in terms of research, that's presented 5 love languages. And it was originally introduced in 1992 by a man named Gary Chapman. And he says that one of the first love language, I'll go into them, is words of affirmation. So I definitely think that somebody who likes words of praise, words of kindness, like literally the person who loves the birthday card and someone to write kind words, like that for them is everything. Like somebody said something really lovely, the kind texts, that kind of thing. You're great, you're wonderful, all of that sort of like real motivational language is something that would mean everything to somebody. And sometimes like from trauma, maybe we didn't have that. So it's something that we really like to give to others. But then in turn, without like verbalizing it to somebody, they might not know that that's your love language. And in terms of a partner or a friendship, this is a great chat to have. Like, I wonder, like, what's yours? Like, let's reflect, whether it's friendships, this conversation for me originally started with a group of friends versus with a partner. So it's quite interesting just to sit and reflect a little bit, like what would you connect more with. So number 1, we'll talk a bit more, but words of affirmation, that might be your love language, or you might have a few, but we will often like lean, if you really reflect on it, like often how you give is kind of what you're hoping to receive, but it's not always what others are doing. The next is quality time. So some people it's quality time for them. And I recently have had a friendship that has kind of like, I wouldn't say like there was no falling out, but like I've been pining for that friendship for a few years, and wondering sort of like why the conversation kind of is a bit slower, why we haven't met up as often, because for me personally, like quality time means everything. And my anxious mind is often kind of creating a story that like, oh, I wonder if I've upset that person. I wonder if, maybe it's one of these friendships that like drifts, but actually we keep coming back. And that person just said, oh, do you know what? There are some friendships so strong that, kind words once in a while, meeting up, being there when you need to, that's enough. And I think that for her love language is obviously words of affirmation, and mine's obviously quality time, because I'm feeling a little bit like disheartened. But having like a little bit of insight on that made me realize actually like it's nothing to take personal. The friendship's all fine. But I was definitely feeling that way. So, quality time is definitely mine. Like I feel like, if somebody says like, I'm sorry, I'm busy for the next like 3 months, I kind of feel like disappointed or let down. For me, making time for a cup of tea, popping in, whatever, like that's definitely, going on a date night with my husband like means so much more to me than a bouquet of flowers. And so my love language is clearly like, it's not about going out for dinner, it's about just like sitting and having time to talk, and that's not everyone's love language. So again, let's just thinking a little bit about for you, words of affirmation, quality time. It might be both, but there'll be one that you feel like really ticks your box. The third one is physical touch. So for some people, like you might feel like not everyone's like a huggy person. In the UK, often going for like, a little cheek kiss kind of like type thing. Some people like go for the handshake. Obviously growing up in Canada, like I've always been like a big handshaker. But for some of us, physical touch is not their thing. I find like, especially in a relationship that is maybe like more not necessarily a friendship, a little bit more romantic, physical touch is probably a really big one. If physical touch is not necessarily your love language, somebody who has a love language of physical touch will find it very difficult if that's not being expressed in some sort of way. And you can see these sorts of things coming to light, in some of these like experimental shows, like Married at First Sight. I can think of like this couple, if anybody's watched it. But like this, they were the most beautiful human beings. Actually, really, I think the world was hoping they'd end up together. But in terms of physical touch, like, she really needed that. And for him, that was something he was working on, but that didn't define the relationship. But for somebody to, some people, if physical touch is like one of their definite types of love language, then, and they're not getting that, then that would be a relationship that would be very hard to be in long term. So again, like it shifts over time, or it's about sharing. Like actually, people are not mind readers. I think that's something we need to remember. If you're feeling unfulfilled in a relationship, but that nothing's like really deeply wrong in that, it's just about maybe opening up a conversation. Like actually, I show my affection, my kindness, I show my appreciation for you, in this way. Or you can recognize like how they're showing appreciation, but maybe not necessarily in the way that you recognize it or tick it as a box. And the last one is genuinely like it's just receiving gifts. And I know that might sound like very materialistic, but actually for some people, like that's not a bad thing, for some people, like having a little bouquet of flowers is like, oh my gosh, they've left me this feels awesome. Like that's a really big treat. Some people just love the idea of somebody, and it doesn't have to be like a fortune, but they like to have a cup of tea made for them and given to them. Someone remembers how they like that, or a coffee is just brought to you by your friend when they know that you've had a long night or whatever. But receiving gifts like doesn't have to mean like buying a holiday, which could be like a huge one, but that's not really the end game. It might be, just like something small to say, I'm thinking of you. I think back to a friend of mine who just out of the blue, we had a dinner. So, both like quality time, my kind of thing. And then that person sent me flowers just to say, like, you didn't seem yourself. I just wanted to show that like I'm here. And for me, receiving that gift was just like extra lovely. Even though quality time is like definitely my number one love language, we all enjoy all of these. It's just that there's maybe a preference that we lean to, or maybe you're feeling unfulfilled. If there's one that really makes you feel that sense of being valued and respected and cared about and thought of, and that sort of thing, I want you just to think about that. Which one stands out for you. So is it words of affirmation that make you feel amazing? Is it quality time, physical touch, acts of service, receiving gifts? Maybe a great activity, you could pause right now and just see if you could put them like in order of like importance to you. I think that I would put quality, like yours would be different, which I'd love to hear, or feedback. Maybe at the bottom of the video, you can tell me like what order you put yours. But I think like I would put quality time. I forgot to mention, sorry, the fourth one, silly me. I went straight to receiving gifts, acts of service as well. That's like just doing nice things, like maybe, I don't know, you needed help with picking up a package and dropping it off, and you had just said like you were really stressed and somebody went and did that for you. Or maybe you have like a sore shoulder and your friend just like partner, whatever, like it doesn't have to be intimate to like be like, oh, can you just like give a little like rub and just see if you can get into that little knot for me, that it doesn't have to be that way. Acts of service are, just showing that kindness by doing things. So yeah, sorry. Words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. So that just gives you a sense, like what order would you put them in? And again, I think I would put quality time. I just know that about myself. I know that actually from reflecting on that friendship I told you about earlier, like what am I missing here? And it's because I'm just like pining for a bit quality time, where they're like great over there, like we're fine, and I'm thinking like something's wrong, but actually no, that's fine. We just have different love languages, and at some point we do meet up and it's like no time's passed. I know as well my next one would probably be words of affirmation. I personally like a beautifully written card. There's nothing like, I'm very blessed. I have a very like cool relationship with my dad, and he messages me every day, actually just to say like, hey, how are you? Hey, daughter. I'm very, very, very blessed to have that relationship, even though I live in another country. But I can't, that's obviously my dad's love language too, is like, are those words, because he wouldn't spend the time doing it if that didn't make him feel like he was showing that kindness, that love, that respect. And I think that even just like cracking a joke, sending a meme, hey sunshine, that kind of language is like enough. It doesn't have to be anything, I guess like a gift for me personally. And that's not to say it's wrong if any of you have put, receiving and, buying and receiving gifts is not a bad love language, but it's also just having a healthy boundary with knowing like you don't have to like break the bank for that love, like, that kind of thing. You can still be a great mate or a great partner without like spending. But that some people do like to receive small items are reasonable as a love language. So, physical touch would probably be a bit lower for me, but that doesn't make it wrong if you are somebody who just needs that cuddle, wants to hold hands in a relationship, wants to have that like, snuggle up on the sofa. That is like being human, and actually all of that stuff, being a bit more touchy-feely as a person is a love language that you absolutely can want. And, for some of us, these might be lower on the list because of a past experience, or, or higher on the list because of a past, trauma. But, these love languages are all about being human, and that these things are things that some of us like really do find like it's unwritten communication saying like I care. And so it's learning about the other person, whether it's like a platonic relationship or romantic, it works. Then you've also got obviously your acts of service. So let me talk to you a little bit about this. This is like somebody who's done like a selfless, thoughtful act to just like make someone's life easier. So I come from a teaching background. Actually, that was my original place, and I definitely found like marking high school students' English papers something that was like always on my like to-do list. And I remember coming into work, I had had a difficult time and had a little bit of time off work. And I remember coming in, and my head of department had like divvied up all of the papers across the team, and everybody, just to support me in that moment of my life, had marked all of those different papers. And I'd come in and I didn't have to I was rushing and thinking like, I'm going to have to pull an all-nighter to get this work done. And so I'm using like a platonic example, but like an act of service, somebody doing that without even asking, telling me, was like one of like the most beautiful things. Somebody making you a meal is like an act of service. Like, how nice is it to be cooked a meal, made a cup of tea? I can reflect on, I've got 2 small children, like I message, so like having a house clean, running someone like a bath, these are all acts of service. But anything at all that's like thoughtful, that was done to make someone's life easier, is an act of service. And for some of us, like, that is all we want. Like, we just want the thought. We want somebody to see like, this this would make this person's life easier. And that is that sense of communication, and that's how we feel loved. I remember a friend of mine, I remember bringing her a coffee. So I suppose it was like slightly gift, but also an act of service. And she'd not long had a baby, and she was like, I think this is all I needed. But for her, she was like missing maybe that element. Maybe that was a little bit more of her love language, and that was just not being fulfilled. She was feeling like overwhelmed, and she just needed that to happen a bit more. And I think after that, she went and shared with her partner that like sometimes just like bringing you a coffee is like the kindest, nicest, most fulfilling thing in a day, whatever it is. But don't be afraid to share this with your platonic or romantic relationships, especially with friendships. I think like saying, hey, have you ever heard of these like love languages? It's such an interesting, intriguing thing. Like, where would you be? And then you can maybe like work on that connection and those friendships. Or you might even find like in work, you'll notice that you're not feeling fulfilled. Maybe you're feeling like a difficult relationship with someone at work, and in some small way this might help, because you might realize like actually you don't realize that they're trying to tell you that you're doing a good job, because they're maybe not using positive phrases and affirmations, but maybe they are, putting your ideas in front of the right people with your name on them, like trying to do an act of service, but you can't see it straight away. So I don't know, it's thinking outside the box there. And obviously your last one, receiving gifts, which could definitely be at the top. Like, don't worry, like if receiving something makes you feel good, but that's like a tangible token of love and thoughtfulness. So like something like a meaningful gift, outside of a special occasion, usually, I don't know, something small like, what's your favorite chocolate, or whatever it is, that just something small and personal like goes a long way for some people. So I think that's it. Just looking at maybe those love languages a little bit, like in a little bit more depth, could help you recognize a little bit more about yourself. Um, a little bit about how you, I don't know, how you can connect better with other people, learn a little bit more about other people. Maybe you will strengthen your relationships. I definitely think that this is a great one if you do have a partner, or if you don't, but you've had other partners in the past, maybe wondering why it didn't feel right. Because sometimes like you're just like missing something, and that missing piece could be that your communication styles are totally different, but you've never really been able to talk about it. And again, you can pull up things like this. Often maybe some people just like want a phone call over a text message, and they want a little bit of quality time, like they want to see you face to face. So anyways, just asking yourself like where and how could you maybe use this theory, maybe could you use your knowledge of yourself to potentially just like strengthen your relationships in any way. So yeah, I like love languages. I could spend ages talking about them, but I think this is just a nice way in. And so let's come back a little bit to the beginning of like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that third layer of like our psychological need comes from belonging, comes from that sensation of love. So how is it that you personally like feel love? And how is it that you give it? And asking yourself, is that a little bit different to someone else? And how can you potentially like, fulfill their points, their expectations, their definitions of love. And I remember really reflecting as I kind of worked through like, the strange years trying to find like a person that I'd like to be with. I think that I just didn't really understand that I'm not I'm not giving them what they need, because I actually didn't know what they needed, and maybe they weren't fulfilling what I needed because they weren't showing that love and connection the same way, and that's okay too. But if you do have the openness to talk about it, it's pretty great. But more to the point, I also want you to look at this. So, hierarchy of needs is just telling us that it's normal and human that we want belonging and connection and relationships, and this word love. Your love languages is just a little bit of talk about how do you give and receive love, how do you value it, what does it look like for you, so that you can further talk about it. But I also think that especially for those of us who have experienced trauma, there's another really beautiful piece of research that are also called like, what are your roots of safety? So let's go back to Maslow's hierarchy. You've got that bottom layer of like just, food and whatever your physiological needs, but then the next layer is safety. So within a healthy relationship, I think those two like really play into each other, having those boundaries, having that safety, again, platonic or romantic, but having like a model to talk about things, to guide you through conversations like the love languages is amazing. I'm not saying like love language is the be all end all, but I think it opens up a really lovely conversation and a place for reflection for all of us, And so I also wanted to just briefly touch upon the roots of safety model. It's something that I will do a whole session on at some point, but maybe if you find it interesting, it has like applications to anything in terms of like being a little bit more trauma informed in terms of your relationships. And I find it's kind of interesting to think about. So, what are roots of safety and how can they aid in our relationships? It is said that there are 8 roots of safety and 3 overarching categories or sort of pathways to get there that can help us understand the needs of ourselves and of others. So we're going to look at understanding our own route to safety. So ask yourself these 2 questions. when, you feel like you need to feel safe, like where do you seek kind of that sense of refuge? Like where do you go? What makes you feel safe? And that's your next question, is like, what makes me feel safe and secure? And that's really important. So there's a few different routes and I suppose pathways that most of us take. One of your routes is you seek like inner guidance. So some people like to go into themselves. So in terms of like having a conversation with a partner, you understanding your roots of safety and sharing that with someone else means that you don't have a miscommunication about like, especially like having like trauma. We need to learn a little bit about like, why am I retreating? Why am I pulling away? Where am I going? And how can I like explain that a little bit to, those people around me? So when I think about inner guidance, I am like thinking of an example of, meditation or journaling. You take yourself away and you just feel like you want to do some work, some inner guidance with yourself. You want to get in touch with like maybe your intuition, and you use like self-reflective tools like that. So some people might feel like, oh, they want some space from me, they want some distance, but actually you might say, look, I'm just actually one of my like pathways, one of my routes to safety is like just to have some like breath, some meditation. I'm going to just take some time away and look for that inner guidance. Another one is like sensory experience. So some people like maybe they want to light a candle. People use a weighted blanket. Some people are like, I need to go for a run in nature. Maybe I just need to lay in the sun. I just need to take some time out. But like they need a sensory experience to like just to connect possibly with the present moment, a little bit of mindfulness there. But that might be one of your routes to safety. So for you to know that, I know in my relationship with my partner that he knows if my anxiety is definitely creeping up, that without me talking about it, sometimes I am in the fog and I can't remember, but he knows that like being by the water, being by the seaside where we live, taking me to the beach without me even realizing, like saying, hey, like, do you know what, let's go for a walk on the seafront. Actually, like I instantly start to feel a little bit more myself. Like that is, I think, a sensory experience, a walk, fresh air and nature is definitely one I can connect with. But again, that might not be your preference. I think that's the word we're looking for. And again, these are, another person might want like a private retreat or alone time. They might just want to say like, I just need to go watch something on TV by myself upstairs. Or you might like pull away from a friendship. Like you might have meeting them out and you might think like, listen, I'm just not feeling myself. And that person might feel like, you don't want them to feel offended, but you can say, look, like I'm experiencing like, I just need to have a bit of time out. I'm feeling like I just need to use like one of my like, safety routes for like my well-being tonight. If you opened up that conversation, it might just be like, I'm gonna, close the curtains and watch a bit of TV in my room by myself and like decide not to go out that night. And it's not about them. This is just your route to safety. And it opens up a healthy conversation. Like that is your self-preservation. That is you working through, your past trauma. That's honoring yourself. Maybe you just want to get lost in a book, in a protected space. That's what we're talking about. Like a private retreat, like a protected space by yourself on your own, somewhere where you feel like that is like, it's just you. Some people like to go sit in a sauna at the gym or sit in the hot tub even. Like that can kind of mix with sensory. But like if you are there by yourself and you just sat there and you just want the quiet, like all of these things could be a retreat. Some people are looking for quality relationships as their retreat. You want to talk. Like you want to have your needs met by another person sometimes. And that could be your safety retreat. But, being trauma informed in terms of like talking about these retreats, somebody might not know that you want that. So, some people, you might want touch. You might want potentially like somebody to help you come up with an answer, some people want not to be alone like the other ones, like, and do that self kind of reflection and that time and space. You actually need and want to be with someone. Closeness and proximity is really powerful. Sorry to refer to British television, but there's this like beautiful moment when I was watching like a traveling show, and this young man had found out like his sister was really struggling, and he started to really cry on this reality TV show, and he just looked at this producer and he was like, can somebody just give me a hug right now? It was such a beautiful moment in TV to show like this man feeling like, I just need a hug. And so for him, his like retreat was like he needed closeness and proximity. He just wanted a hug. And that was like, man to man, like, I just need someone give me a hug right now, give me a cuddle. And I actually found that such a powerful moment, because clearly for him, his safety, whether it was trauma or not, but like in this moment that felt really emotionally heavy, like he wanted that hug, he wanted that connection. Or like sometimes people just need to be like, all right, I'm feeling like, my retreat to safety for, some people is to go out and just do something fun, having friends, like going do something with them, phoning somebody and being like, hey, let's, I don't know, go paddleboarding. I don't know your examples. It could just be something simple, but you wanting that like closeness to be near somebody and just do something like an activity with them is really great. And that is one of your 8 safety retreats, which is a great one to think about. So again, asking yourself, are you some of these, I don't know, like I think I'm more like retreat into myself. I'm actually the closest in proximity. I often say like no, and I think it's about being able to communicate that, like being able to say to a partner or a friend, like, based on my past trauma, actually, like I definitely have a route to safety, and my route to safety is like self-reflection, and that is not me being horrible or rude, that this is just like the way that I like to rest and reset and recharge. And when I just need some space, where others, would want that closeness, they would actually be